All right, let's get right into it. The Industrial Revolution. It's a topic we all think we know. But what did it actually feel like to live through? Today, we're going to dig into that and really try to answer the question, how did this massive, world-changing shift from farms to factories really affect the lives of everyday people? I mean, just look at this. On the left, you've got this peaceful, quiet village. And on the right, a city literally choked with factory smoke. This isn't over centuries. This is what happened in just a couple of generations. It's an absolutely staggering transformation. So the question is, how on earth did a whole country change so completely, so fast? To really understand the revolution, we've got to go back before the first factory whistle ever screamed. We need to set the scene. In the mid-18th century, a world that was, well, about to disappear forever. So picture this. It's 1750. Britain's population is about 11 million people. And here's the number you need to remember. A whopping 80% of them, that's 8 out of every 10 people, lived out in the countryside. Farming wasn't just a job back then, it was the very rhythm of life itself. And this image here of Aylesford in Kent, this gives you a real feel for that world. Your life was ruled by the seasons, not by a clock on the wall. Your whole world was basically your village. Everything was tied to the land. It was a life built on tradition and community. But, as you can probably guess, all of that was about to be turned upside down. And here's where things get super interesting, because the first domino to fall in this whole industrial revolution, it wasn't in a grimy factory. Nope, it was out in the green fields. The land itself was about to be totally and completely remade. So what kicked it all off? People. The population absolutely exploded, almost doubling in just 75 years. And all those new mouths to feed put incredible pressure on the system. They needed more food, and that desperate need for food is what set the stage for one of the biggest upheavals in the country's history. For hundreds of years, this is what a lot of the English countryside looked like. These are the old open fields. The village had common land where basically anyone could let their animals graze or go gather firewood. It was this ancient medieval system that was all about shared rights and living as a community. And then this happened. Through thousands of new laws passed by Parliament, those old common lands were privatized. Hedges and stone walls shot up all over the place, carving that shared landscape into a patchwork of private property. They called it enclosure. Now, enclosure was a classic double-edged sword. On one side, it kicked off a huge agricultural revolution. With private fields, farmers could experiment with new crops, they could breed bigger and better animals, and it worked. Food production shot through the roof. But, and this is a huge but, there was a massive human cost. Families who didn't own land lost their ancient right to use the commons. New farm machines meant you didn't need as many workers. Suddenly, you have this whole class of people set adrift from the land, with nowhere to go, except to the cities. So what do you do with this huge new population of landless workers? Well, they became the fuel for the next phase of the revolution. They started pouring into the towns looking for any kind of work, and they found it in this radical new kind of place, the factory. You see, before this, most people worked from home, weaving or spinning on their own schedule. But the factory system, which guys like Richard Arkwright pioneered, changed everything. For the very first time, work meant going to a specific building, starting when a bell told you to, stopping when it told you to. You lost all control over your own time. It was a massive, profound loss of freedom. The hunger for cheap labor was just insane. And children were the cheapest labor you could find. Just listen to these words from Eliza Marshall, a child worker who was testifying in Parliament. A 13-hour day was normal. But then it got worse, a 17-hour day. Can you even imagine? This wasn't work. It was the complete and utter consumption of a childhood. And the physical price they paid was just devastating. A doctor, Samuel Smith, described how the bones of these children, which were still growing, would literally bend and deform from standing for so long. He talks about kids getting knock knees and even losing inches in height. It was a brutal reality that was written right there on their bodies. And it wasn't just in the mills. Deep down underground, kids were working in the coal mines. This is from an 8-year-old girl named Sarah Gooder. She was a trapper. Her job was to sit by herself in the pitch-black darkness for 12 hours a day just to open and close a door for air. Her testimony is just haunting. "I have to trap without a light, and I'm scared. I dare not sing then. So these factories and mines, they acted like giant magnets, just pulling in this huge new workforce that had been pushed off the land. And towns that were once just small little communities, they exploded almost overnight into these massive, sprawling, and totally unplanned cities. Just get a load of these numbers. In a single century, Manchester's population grew by more than 17 times. Liverpool, same thing, 17 times bigger. This wasn't just growth, it was a chaotic, uncontrolled explosion, and the cities were nowhere near ready for it. So what was the result of all that chaos? Well, this. This might be the single most shocking statistic of the entire era. In 1842, the average life expectancy for a laborer living in the city of Liverpool was just 15 years. 15. Meanwhile, out in the countryside, it was more than double that at 33. So you have to ask why? What made city life so incredibly deadly? And here's the grim reality of why. Houses were just thrown up. They were poorly built. They were crammed together. There was no garbage collection, so trash just piled up in the streets. There were no proper sewers, and the drinking water was often contaminated with raw sewage. It was the perfect breeding ground for diseases like cholera, which would just rip through these neighborhoods at terrifying speed. Now, when you're faced with conditions like these, in the factories, in the cities, you just knew it was going to happen. People started to fight back. They started to organize, to protest, and to demand that things had to change. A big part of this fight for better conditions was the fight for a political voice. I mean, if you can't even vote, how are you supposed to change the laws that are making your life miserable? This led to one of the most famous movements of the time, the Campaign for Women's Suffrage. And two major groups emerged with very different ideas. You had the suffragists, who believed in peaceful, patient persuasion. But then, frustrated by how slow things were going, you had the suffragettes. Their motto was deeds, not words, and they believed in direct, militant action to force the government to listen. And all of that protesting and campaigning, it did work. It was painfully slow, but it did bring about real change. You can see on this timeline, the progress was step by step, but it was real. It starts in 1833, making it illegal to hire really young kids. Then in 1842, women and children are banned from working underground in the mines. Then you get the 10-Hour Act. Every single one of these laws was a hard-fought battle. But over decades, all that pressure built a whole new set of rules to protect people. So, after all of that chaos, all that struggle, all that transformation, where does that leave us? Let's try and connect the dots from then straight to the world that we are all living in right now. Here's the most important takeaway. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about steam engines. It completely rewrote the rules of how we live. The very idea of living in a city, working for a salary, buying things that were made on the other side of the planet, all of that became the new normal because of this period. It basically created the blueprint for modern life. And that really brings us to our final thought here. Look, there's no question the Industrial Revolution laid the groundwork for the technology and prosperity many of us enjoy today. It gave us the modern world, plain and simple. But as we've seen, it was a world built on the backs of displaced communities, on the broken bodies of children, and on lives that were cut brutally short. So the question we're left with is a big one. What was the price?